She was everything a babysitter should be: warm smile, clean record, glowing references. But the old Mustang named Rust didn't believe it. He didn't rear, he didn't bolt, he simply stood, silent, unblinking, between her and the foal's stall. No one understood it until a syringe hit the dirt. In the end, it wasn't instinct, it wasn't training. It was trust, wild, wordless, and deadly accurate. Because when no one else saw the danger, the Mustang did. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. Cody, Wyoming was caught in the middle of one of its blustery spring awakenings. The winds swept through the sagebrush and across the open plains with the weight of stories older than time. The cottonwood trees along the banks of Shoshone River rattled like bones, and the sharp scent of pine mingled with something wilder, something from the edge of Yellowstone itself. At the northern ridge of town, nestled between a craggy hill and a weather-stained barn, sat the Whitlock Ranch, a modest slice of land bordered by white fencing and shadowed by the Absaroka Range. The horses there were not pampered show animals, but sturdy, spirited creatures of mixed bloodlines, rescues mostly. But among them stood one unlike the rest: Rust. Rust was a weathered Mustang stallion, around 17 years old, with a coat the color of worn copper and a jagged white blaze cutting through his face like lightning in a desert storm. His mane was thick and unruly, dark as volcanic soil, and his eyes, one slightly clouded with age, held the glint of a soul that had outrun hunters and watched friends fall. Years ago, he had been found near death, caught in a leg trap deep in the Bighorn Basin. His hind leg bore the memory of it, a crescent-shaped scar just above the hock. It was Grayson Whitlock who found him then, bleeding and mad with pain, and it was Grayson who'd refused to put him down. The old man had stitched the wound himself, sleeping beside the stallion in the cold barn for a week until the fever broke. From that point on, Rust had never left his side. Grayson Whitlock was built like the forge he worked in, broad-shouldered, soot-scarred, with hands tough as old leather. At 51, he carried the gravity of a man who'd seen things fall apart and decided to build them anyway. A master mechanic in town, Grayson fixed more than trucks. He had a way with broken things: cars, fences, people. His quiet presence was grounding. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was worth hearing. His wife, Dana, was the opposite in many ways. She was lean and lively, with short auburn curls and an energy that moved like water over stone, gentle but constant. At 46, Dana worked remotely as a wildlife biologist specializing in predator-prey ecosystems. She had a doctorate, a telescope in the attic, and a notebook filled with migration patterns taped to the fridge. But her heart was firmly rooted in the rhythms of home: the late-night feeding of the horses, the morning coffee overlooking the fields, and the bond between her husband and the wild horse that once refused to be touched. The couple had never really needed outside help for their small ranch. Between Dana's flexible schedule and Grayson's early evenings, they managed just fine. But this week was different. Dana had been invited to attend an emergency conference in Denver, something about an invasive species pushing into wolf territories, and Grayson had to accompany a friend on a last-minute road trip to Billings to haul in heavy machinery. They were caught in a bind. Their regular ranch hand, Lucy, had moved to Boise for school, and none of their neighbors were free. So Dana did something she wasn't quite comfortable with. She posted a help request on the local equestrian board. That's when Cassandra May appeared. She arrived in a silver Subaru the next morning, punctual to the minute, wearing denim jeans, a soft teal sweater, and a polished smile that gleamed like a welcome sign. She was in her mid-30s, average height, with a graceful posture that made her seem both confident and calm. Her voice was soft, with the gentle twang of the Dakotas, and her manner was courteous to the point of charm. "I saw your posting," she said, stepping out with a printed resume in hand. "And I thought, maybe I could lend a hand. Grew up around horses, volunteered at the Cloudspur Riding Center near Billings, got references and a clean background, whatever you need." Her hazel eyes held the kind of sincerity that people wanted to trust. Dana did. At least for a moment. Cassandra's paperwork checked out. The Riding Center had her on record. The references were brief, but no red flags. Dana felt a bit of relief. Maybe this would work out after all. Cassandra walked the property with ease, noting feeding schedules, stall names, and the layout of the paddocks like someone who'd done this before. She even brought her own gloves and mentioned she'd clean the troughs if time allowed. "My mom used to say, 'Leave a place better than you found it,'" she offered with a smile. But Russ didn't smile back. The moment Cassandra stepped within 10 feet of the corral, Rust's ears pinned flat against his skull. He backed away, then advanced 2 slow steps forward, snorting hard through his nostrils. Dana paused. "He's usually gentle," she said. "Doesn't love strangers, but never like this." Cassandra chuckled nervously. "Maybe I smell like cats," she joked. "My roommate had one." Dana tried to smile, but something unsettled her. Rust didn't move his gaze. He stood like a soldier at post, head low, eyes locked, body stiff. When Cassandra leaned toward the fence to offer a carrot, Rust suddenly reared. His front hooves slammed the dirt, and he let out a shrill, piercing whinny, so sharp it rattled the empty water buckets and caused the nearby pigeons to scatter from the barn roof. Dana ran forward, grabbing his halter gently. "Rust, easy boy, it's all right." But the stallion didn't relax. He positioned himself directly between Cassandra and the adjacent stall, Ember's stall. Ember was a 2-year-old Palomino filly, rescued just last summer. Skittish but sweet, she followed Rust around like a younger sibling, clinging to the one figure in the world who understood fear. And now Rust stood guard, nostrils flaring, body coiled with purpose. Dana pulled him back gently and muttered something about hormones and herd instincts. Cassandra stayed calm, stepping back with her hands raised. "It's all right, I get it. Boundaries." The rest of the morning passed with odd stillness. Cassandra stayed near the fence, jotting notes in a leather-bound journal, while Dana returned to her laptop inside the house. But from the window, Dana noticed something. Rust hadn't moved an inch. He stood with his chest to the fence, tail twitching, eyes still fixed, watching, guarding. As the sun dipped behind the cottonwoods, Dana stepped back onto the porch with 2 mugs of tea. Cassandra thanked her and took a seat on the bench. "Beautiful place," she said, glancing over the field. "Peaceful." But Dana's eyes drifted to the Mustang still standing sentinel in the twilight. "He's never acted like that," she said quietly. "Not even with the vet or strangers at the fair. Not like this." Cassandra sipped her tea. "Animals are funny. Sometimes they just sense things." Rust didn't sleep that night. He paced the fence line outside Ember's stall, hooves crunching against gravel. Every now and then he'd snort into the wind, ears rotating like satellite dishes. And Dana, from the upstairs window, watched him as the wind howled over Cody, whispering secrets she no longer knew how to ignore. The wind hadn't let up. By the second morning, the air over Cody had turned restless, tugging at barn doors and rippling the horse blankets like uneasy breaths. A silver frost still clung to the edge of the fields where the sun hadn't yet touched, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk shrieked against the open sky. Dana pulled on her vest and stepped into the morning with coffee in hand and a knot growing slowly in her chest. Cassandra was already out by the paddocks, a burlap sack over her shoulder and a bucket of fresh carrots in her gloved hands. "Good morning," she called out cheerfully, waving toward the porch with that ever-present smile. "I brought some hay tubes from my truck. Figured the horses could use a little treat." Dana hesitated. She hadn't asked Cassandra to bring anything. "That's kind of you," she said, walking toward the corral. "But we usually keep their diet pretty simple. Rust has a sensitive stomach." She said it as politely as she could, masking the tension behind her words. Cassandra nodded, unbothered. "Of course, I'll just offer them to Ember. The younger ones usually tolerate better, right?" Rust didn't wait for her to finish her sentence. He was already at the edge of the fence, mane bristling, body held low like a storm crouched behind a cloud. The moment Cassandra stepped closer with the bucket, he surged forward with a furious whinny, slamming his chest against the rails and sending a loud crack into the cold morning air. The bucket slipped from Cassandra's hands, scattering carrots across the dirt. "Whoa, Rust," Dana called, running to grab his halter. The stallion's hooves dug into the ground as he shoved his body between Cassandra and Ember's stall again, eyes blazing with an old wild warning. Cassandra took 2 steps back, hands raised again. "I swear, I've never had a horse react like this. It's like he's protecting her." Dana didn't respond. Her fingers moved absently over Rust's mane, but her eyes never left Cassandra. "You said you grew up around horses?" "Since I was a kid," Cassandra replied, brushing straw off her jeans. "My uncle ran a trail riding outfit near Helena. I helped him every summer." Dana nodded, but something didn't sit right. Cassandra's boots looked too clean. Her gloves were soft and new. She smelled faintly of lavender soap, not the dusty, earthen scent of someone who had mucked stalls all her life. As Dana walked back toward the barn, she noticed something else. The security camera above Ember's stall had been shifted, its angle now tilted just enough to miss the food trough. It hadn't been like that yesterday. Inside the tack room, Dana checked the feed log she always kept on paper, just out of habit. Nothing seemed missing, but she circled back to the stall and crouched down near the corner, just beneath the rail. Something was wrong with the texture of the hay. Too moist. She sniffed it. A hint of something sweet, too sweet for standard grain. She stood slowly, brushing off her jeans, and turned just in time to see Cassandra walking toward the back pasture without permission. The backfield wasn't part of the tour she'd given yesterday. It was reserved for the more temperamental rescues, horses that hadn't yet settled, still prone to bolting or biting. "Cassandra?" Dana called out. "Those aren't the socialized ones." Cassandra spun around casually. "Oh, I know. I just thought I saw something moving out here, maybe a coyote?" Dana stepped forward, boots crunching the thin crust of frost underfoot. "Next time, let me know if you're going back there. We've had issues with mountain lions." Cassandra laughed lightly. "Of course, won't happen again." As the day moved on, the sense of unease grew sharper. Rust remained vigilant, pacing near Ember's stall and flaring his nostrils every time Cassandra came within 10 feet. Dana watched from the house, unsure whether it was paranoia or instinct whispering in her ear. That evening, she called Grayson. He answered on the second ring, voice gravelly and low. "Everything all right?" Dana hesitated. "I'm not sure. It's probably nothing, but Rust's been off. He won't relax." "And the new girl, Cassandra, he reacts to her like she's a rattlesnake." Grayson paused. "Rust doesn't act like that without reason, not unless there's something real." "I thought the same," Dana whispered. "I found the camera moved, and I swear I saw her messing with the feed bucket, but Rust knocked it over before I could get a look." "I'll cut my trip short," he said. "Be back by Friday." "No," Dana replied. "Not yet. Let me watch her another day. I want to know if this is just nerves or something more." Later that night, after Cassandra left for the evening, Dana walked the perimeter of the property with Rust beside her, his hooves muffled in the dry grass. When they reached the feeding station, she crouched and used her phone light to inspect the soil. A small object glinted in the corner of the trough, foil, like the edge of a packet. She picked it up with the edge of her sleeve. It had no label, just a clear residue on one corner and the faint imprint of a barcode. "Someone's been putting something in the feed," she muttered. Rust snorted once, deeply, and stood closer, as if to block her from the wind or from something worse. The next day, Dana called in a quiet favor. She contacted Elliot Hayes, a retired county vet in his 60s, who'd once helped them deliver Ember when the foal had arrived emaciated and disoriented. Elliot was thin as a fence post, with kind eyes behind his cracked bifocals, and a voice that always seemed one sentence behind his thoughts. He arrived in a faded blue truck that smelled of menthol and hay. "What do you need?" he asked, stepping down with his weathered satchel. "Just a few tests," Dana said. "On the feed, quietly, off record." Elliot nodded, saying nothing more. That evening, Cassandra returned again, this time with a bag of alfalfa tubes and a warm apple cobbler she insisted on sharing. "Just a little thank you," she said sweetly. Dana took the container, nodded, and smiled. But inside, she'd already made up her mind. Rust didn't eat all night. He simply stood at the stall door, chest out, like a warrior on a wall that only he understood. The wind had settled by morning, but the ranch was no less tense. Cody's skies stretched wide and pale, brushed with streaks of amber light from the rising sun, yet beneath the quiet, something darker stirred. Rust hadn't slept. Dana could tell by the way he paced the eastern fence before dawn, his tail flicking with agitation and his ears alert like radar dishes. The unease had crawled into Dana's bones, clung to her breath like frost. The cobbler Cassandra left the night before remained untouched on the counter, its sweetness now suspicious. Dana's morning began with back-to-back Zoom meetings. Wildlife reports, conservation concerns, and a tangled dispute over migratory corridors occupied her mind. Yet even with a headset on and spreadsheets open, part of her focus remained outside, where Cassandra arrived again just past 9, waving from her car with that familiar, unsettling smile. She was dressed in a lilac windbreaker and beige riding pants, her ponytail neat, not a speck of dirt on her boots. Dana nodded through the window and returned to her screen. Ember neighed from the stall, not the usual soft whicker, but a nervous sound. Rust answered with a long, low snort that Dana felt in her ribs. 15 minutes into a budget proposal, a sound cracked through her concentration like a bullet. Rust's scream. Dana dropped her headset and bolted to the window. Dust spiraled in the front yard as Rust charged across the paddock. Muscles tensed, teeth bared. His front hooves struck the gate with a shattering crack, and the latch gave way. He didn't pause. He galloped full force toward the barnyard where Cassandra stood, startled, mid-reach into her satchel. Rust's whinny reached a crescendo as he slammed to a halt inches from her. He reared, his massive hooves slicing the air, then landed hard and shoved his head directly into her bag. Cassandra screamed, trying to pull it away, but Rust was faster. He clamped down with his teeth and yanked the bag to the ground, ripping open the leather flap with a snort of fury. A syringe clattered onto the dirt. Dana's breath caught. She was already sprinting outside, boots thudding against the boards. "What is that?" she shouted. Cassandra's face had drained to porcelain. "It's insulin," she stammered. "I'm diabetic, I forgot to tell you. I keep it in my purse." "Why is it unlabeled?" Dana snapped, picking up the syringe with the edge of her jacket. "And why were you hiding it?" Cassandra shook her head, eyes darting toward the fence. I need to go." She made a dash for her car, but Rust blocked her path again, this time stepping sideways, snorting hard. Dana didn't stop her. She watched as Cassandra climbed into the Subaru, revved the engine, and tore down the gravel path, sending a trail of dust skyward like smoke from a fuse. Inside, Dana's fingers trembled as she pulled up the Nest camera footage. She scrolled back to the previous day's noon hour. The grainy feed showed Cassandra in the barn, alone. She appeared to be tidying the feeding area, but then she moved toward Ember's water bucket. Her back obscured the camera for just a moment, but when she turned again, her hands were empty. Dana froze the frame, zoomed in. The slightest movement, the smallest drop, there it was. A ripple in the water that hadn't been there before. She rewound further. Another clip from the evening. Cassandra standing near the hayloft, muttering into her phone. No earbuds, no one else around. Later, she tucked something into the saddle blanket bin. Too fast, too careful. Dana exhaled through clenched teeth and reached for her phone. By late afternoon, she sat across from a new face in her kitchen. Deputy Rhett Monroe, a 38-year-old officer from the Cody Sheriff's Department, sent to investigate. He had sun-darkened skin, light brown eyes beneath a tan Stetson, and a build like an old oak post, firm, upright, and used to withstanding pressure. His voice was calm but direct, shaped by years of ranch town disputes and frontier law. "You say the horse exposed this?" he asked, gesturing toward the syringe sealed in a Ziploc on the table. "Rust knew something was off the moment she got here," Dana replied, arms crossed. "And now I know he was right." Monroe nodded. "I'll run this down to the station for testing. Might take a day or two." Dana showed him the footage on her laptop. He watched quietly, replayed the moment at the trough 3 times, then clicked pause. "You ever heard of Raina Lovell?" he asked suddenly. Dana shook her head. "No, should I?" Monroe pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, then turned the screen toward her. A mugshot filled the display, older but unmistakable. The same eyes, the same smile. "Real name's not Cassandra May, it's Raina Lovell. She's wanted in Montana and Utah, suspicion of poisoning animals. Most cases were inconclusive. She vanishes before anyone gets proof." Dana stared at the photo. Her stomach churned. "How'd she find us?" Monroe shrugged. "These types, they float through Facebook pages, local boards, even church bulletins. Find families with land, animals, trust." Dana sat down slowly, her legs unsteady. Monroe stood, tapping the screen of his phone. "You did the right thing bringing it to us. And that horse of yours, he might have saved lives." Dana looked through the window at Rust, now standing calmly by Ember's stall once more, head bowed as if the storm had passed. That evening, Dana called Grayson again. "She's not who she said she was," she told him. "Her real name's Raina Lovell, and she's not just odd, she's dangerous." There was silence on the other end, then the sound of keys jingling. "I'll be home by morning." Dana nodded, her voice low. "Bring someone. I don't think she's done." Outside, the wind had returned, pushing hard through the sagebrush, as if the land itself had started to stir. Rust lifted his head to the sound, ears flicking, body tense. And in that moment, Dana realized something with chilling certainty. Rust wasn't guarding anymore. He was preparing. The morning mist crawled in slow over Cody like a ghost with unfinished business. Fog crept through fence posts and collected in the troughs, turning the ranch into something dreamlike and cold. Rust stood at the far edge of the field, his copper coat damp from dew, his stance alert and unmoving. It had been 2 nights since Raina, once Cassandra, fled the property. 2 nights of no sleep, no grazing, no relaxation. Just silence, broken by the occasional whinny, sharp and restless like a call no one answered. Grayson had returned home late the night before, just as the stars began to vanish behind the eastern ridge. He looked older than he had when he left, his face lined deeper from worry and fatigue. He wore a brown waxed canvas jacket, black jeans, and work boots caked with mud from the road. "How long's he been like this?" he asked Dana the moment he stepped onto the porch, his eyes tracking Rust's every motion. "Since she left?" Dana said. "He doesn't rest, not even when it's quiet." Inside the house, things felt no better. Dana had found a small brown parcel on their front steps that morning, wrapped in butcher paper with a twine bow. It had no return address, only a note written in thick block letters for Ember, a little something to read. Dana had frozen on the spot. Grayson opened it carefully with a kitchen knife. Inside were 3 picture books, children's titles that looked clean, new. Nestled between the pages was a Ziploc of oat biscuits, the kind Ember liked, and a folded handwritten note. The handwriting was neat, slanted slightly to the right. Dana didn't need to compare it to anything. She recognized it. Raina Lovell. The same scrawl from the employee reference letter she first presented. The same signature on the volunteer form from the writing center. Grayson's jaw locked. "She's taunting us." Rust had already begun to snort and paw the earth violently when the package was brought inside. His eyes widened. Dana stepped out to calm him, but instead of softening, he let out a high-pitched whinny so loud it rattled the storm windows. He reared, spun once, and kicked at the barn wall. Dana called Deputy Monroe immediately. When Monroe arrived 20 minutes later, he wasn't alone. With him was Detective Sharon Reyes, a seasoned investigator from Park County's Major Crimes Unit. She was in her mid-40s, tall and lean, with a dark ponytail streaked with gray and eyes that scanned every corner of her room twice before moving on. Reyes had a blunt, professional air, efficient, but never cold. Her presence filled the living room like a low-pressure front. "She's escalating," Reyes said after reviewing the footage from the gate camera. She stood there for nearly 3 hours, that just beyond the tree line. Hood up, motionless. Grayson leaned against the fireplace, arms crossed. "She didn't come back for the horse." Reyes looked up. "No, she came back for control." Dana rubbed her arms against the chill. "What does that mean?" "She wants you to react, to panic, and she wants to remind you that she's watching." Rust, meanwhile, had taken to pacing the barnyard again. Every time he passed the back of the main stable, he paused at the wall and sniffed near the lower vent panel. Then he'd scrape his hoof over and over again until wood dust curled up from the baseboards. It happened 3 times before Grayson took a crowbar and removed the vent grate. Behind it, wrapped in electrical tape, was a small black device no bigger than a key fob. A microphone. "Bugged," Grayson said flatly. "She's been listening this whole time." Reyes swore under her breath and collected the device with gloves. "She probably planted it that first day. You said you gave her a tour." Dana nodded slowly, remembering how she led Cassandra, no, Raina, through the barn while Ember napped and the other horses grazed out back. She had time. She must have known exactly what she was doing. That night, Dana and Grayson made the call. Ember and the 2 other young horses would be relocated to a neighboring ranch owned by a longtime friend, Eileen Kerr. a retired rodeo rider with a no-nonsense approach to life and a heart as wide as the Wyoming plains. Eileen was in her 60s, compact and strong, with weather-tanned skin and a voice roughened from years of shouting over cheering crowds and stomping hooves. She arrived just before dusk with a 2-horse trailer and a heavy-duty pickup that rattled like a diesel dragon. "You're right to get her out of here," Eileen said, nodding toward Ember as she loaded her carefully into the trailer. "When something smells wrong, it usually is." Rust paced the fence line as the trailer pulled away. He didn't resist or try to follow, but he whinnied twice, low and mournful, and then turned back toward the barn with that same coiled tension. As if he knew the danger wasn't gone, only paused. Inside the house, the sheriff's team installed temporary surveillance upgrades, a new gate camera, a motion-activated perimeter alarm, and hidden mics at the front and back doors. Dana watched silently as men in uniform moved around her kitchen, their boots leaving mud across her floor. The home that once smelled like hay and cinnamon now carried the sterile scent of latex gloves and copy paper. Rust never left the barnyard that night. Dana watched him from the upstairs window at 2:13 a.m. when he stood facing the tree line again, muscles taut, eyes unblinking. Then he lifted his head and let out a whinny, one that rose like a siren into the night, long and shrill and full of something older than words. The sound cut straight into Dana's chest. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a warning. The sky over Cody had turned steel gray by nightfall, a cold hush hanging low over the fields like the pause before a storm. The wind that once whispered secrets through the trees now carried a sharpened edge. A new stillness blanketed the Whitlock ranch, but it was the kind of stillness that felt staged. Because it was. From the outside, everything appeared normal. The porch light glowed with its usual amber hue. Ember's stall had been reset with her old halter slung casually over the gate. Dana's favorite coffee mug sat empty on the windowsill. Grayson's toolbox was left propped against the barn wall, just as it always had been. A child's drawing of a horse taped inside the kitchen window fluttered against the glass. The ranch looked like a family had returned home and let life settle into its usual routine. But Ember wasn't here. Neither was Dana. Nor the Whitlocks. Real daily rhythm. The scene had been carefully built by the joint efforts of the Cody Sheriff's Department and the FBI, a tactical illusion wrapped in normalcy. Hidden cameras were tucked beneath shingles, behind feeders, and inside the troughs. Motion sensors had been calibrated along every fence line. The paddocks were wired for heat signatures. The only two figures truly present were Grayson and Rust. Rust stood just outside the feed barn, his mane thickened from the cold air, hooves quiet on the soft earth. He looked like a statue beneath the moonlight, unmoving, unreadable. Yet his ears twitched at the slightest movement, and his eyes never blinked when they shouldn't. To anyone watching, he appeared like just another old horse waiting for his morning oats. But every muscle beneath his weathered hide was coiled like a spring. Grayson stayed inside the barn's back room, tucked behind a row of hay bales, holding a radio in one hand and a tranquilizer dart gun in the other. He wore black flannel and a canvas vest, boots unlaced for silence. He hadn't shaved in 2 days. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, but sharp with purpose. He wasn't here to fight. He was here to finish it. Agent Willa Prescott had been the one to suggest the trap. She was the lead FBI handler for psychological threat profiling in the region. Early 40s, olive skin, dark hair cut just below her chin, always in a navy field jacket and jeans. Willa had the calm, unreadable tone of someone who'd sat with too many kinds of predators. Some behind bars, others behind charm. People like Raina don't run from power, she'd said. They run toward the illusion of control. And if she believes she still has it, she'll return. Rust's ears flicked toward the southern fence just after 2 a.m. Grayson lowered the radio. "Movement," he whispered. A light snap, a twig underfoot, barely audible, then another. Rust's body tensed, his left hoof shifted 1 inch forward, then froze again. Behind the barn, the motion detectors triggered a silent alert. One red dot blinked on the interior map screen. She was here. Raina Lovell crept along the paddock's edge, hood pulled low, dressed all in black. She moved with a cautious, methodical pace, avoiding the camera blind spots, almost. She carried a small canvas bag strapped across her chest. The same bag she had when Rust first pulled the syringe loose days ago. Her hands were gloved. Her posture was too confident for hesitation. She knew the ranch. She believed it was hers to manipulate. She reached the outer latch of the feed barn and pulled out a small tool to jimmy the lock. It clicked silently. Rust did not move. She slipped inside. A breath, then a step. Then she reached toward the stall gate, the one marked Ember. That was when Rust struck. He bolted from his stillness like thunder torn loose from the sky. His hooves pounded the ground with the weight of fury and memory. His head lowered, ears flattened, and in 2 seconds, he was between Raina and the stall, rearing high, letting out a shrill, soul-shaking whinny that lit the night like a fire alarm. His hooves slammed into the barn floor, inches from her chest. She screamed and stumbled back, clutching the bag to her chest. The barn lights flooded on. The alarms blared. Grayson stepped out, weapon-trained. Deputy Monroe and Agent Prescott were already rushing in from either side, flashlights cutting through the cold. Raina dropped the bag and raised both hands. Her eyes were wide, but not in shock, in fury. "You don't understand," she shouted as they cuffed her. "It was never about harm. I was trying to prove something." Russ stood still again, but his nostrils flared and his body remained tight as a wire. Inside the bag, agents found 2 more syringes, an unlabeled glass vial, and a small leather notebook filled with scribbled dosage calculations. In the days that followed, Raina confessed to conducting personal behavioral trials on rescue animals across the West, claiming to be developing a humane method for emotional control, particularly for high-anxiety species like wild Mustangs. She admitted to slipping trace amounts of chemical compounds into food or water to test docility. But Rust had never been docile. He had remembered pain, and he had remembered truth. By the end of the week, Rust had become more than a horse. The mayor of Cody arrived in a navy suit and wind-blown tie, standing beneath the town's modest courthouse steps to deliver a speech to a small crowd and a camera crew from the local news. "For bravery in the face of danger," the mayor declared, "and for defending not only this land, but the voiceless creatures upon it, we present this medal to Rust, protector of Cody." A simple braided halter was hung gently around Rust's neck, and a blue and gold badge rested against his shoulder. Dana stood beside him with Ember returned to her side. Grayson had one hand on Rust's withers. The horse did not bray, did not move. He stood proud, watching the crowd like a soldier on post. Later, when the reporters left, Dana's niece, a shy 6-year-old named Maisie, visiting from Bozeman, walked up to Rust with a paper medal she'd drawn herself. "You don't need ropes," she said, voice soft. "You're a hero without reins." Rust lowered his head, and she hugged his neck. Dana wiped her eyes before anyone could see. Sometimes the most powerful protectors are the ones who cannot speak. Rust didn't have words, but he had instinct, memory, and heart. He didn't need permission to do the right thing. He simply did it. In our daily lives, we often overlook quiet warnings, gut feelings, strange silences, subtle changes. But what if we listened? What if we paused long enough to notice what doesn't feel right? Trust is not always about logic. It's about listening to our instincts, to the animals we love, and to the small voices that speak through action, not noise. Rust reminds us that real strength is not in how loud we are, but how far we're willing to go to protect what matters. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to believe in silent heroes. Leave a comment with your thoughts or a story of your own. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that honor courage, loyalty, and the bond between humans and animals.